The next step in the solution of a cooling tower in the software is to define all the areas where pressure losses occur as the air flow through the cooling tower. You click on the pressure losses tab, and on this screen do you specify all those areas. On this screen we don't specify the pressure losses in pascals, but rather the pressure loss coefficients, where the equation of the pressure loss equals the pressure loss coefficient times rho v squared over 2. This screen is a great visual tool to show you which pressure loss areas are included in the analysis by the indicators shown on the path that the air follows through the cooling tower. So if we want to deselect the rain zone, we click on that and you'll see that the rain zone indicator disappears. Let's put it back. And you can see that the rain zone indicator reappears. So for the rain zone that we've selected, if this text box is not active, it will use a built-in empirical equation. If I don't want to use the built-in empirical equation, if I know what the pressure loss coefficient of the rain zone is, I can deselect the empirical equation selector and this box will become active and I can enter the loss coefficient for the rain zone. But if I want to use the built-in empirical equation, I click there and that will be included in the software. For most of the empirical equations built into the software, the user doesn't need to specify any more inputs, especially those where there's no asterisk. So for the inlet losses, if you select it, no other input is required from the user, as those loss coefficients are only dependent on the dimensions of the cooling tower. But for those with an asterisk, if I want to, for instance, include tower supports, I can click on tower supports. And now because there's an asterisk, I need to supply more information to the software so that it can calculate the tower support loss coefficient more accurately. And therefore, for tower supports and for the drift eliminator, you must go to the empirical equation tab. And there you have to supply more information so that the software can calculate the loss coefficient. The last and arguably the most important input for the pressure loss coefficients is that of the fill. If you selected the fill over here, you go to the fill loss coefficient tab, and there you have two options. Firstly, you can specify the parameters, or you can use the fill database. If you use the fill database, select use the database, and if you go to transfer areas, it is the same fill that is selected under the find fill transfer parameters. If we go back to the pressure losses, the second option is specify parameters. Here you enter the equation with the relevant coefficients for that specific equation that you've selected. It is very important to note that if you use database here, most probably you also want to select it over here. Some designers, in the very rare occasion, want to use different parameters for the pressure losses than what's available in the database for the transfer coefficients. So if you select use database on the transfer coefficients, just make sure that you also select use database over here. If you don't do it, if you run the software, it will give you a warning message just to note that you haven't selected use database under the pressure loss coefficients.